Okay, so out of all the iPhones that Apple dropped in their September keynote, the iPhone 14 Plus to me felt quote-unquote the newest. And that's kind of bizarre to say because overall, I think this year's lineup of Apple's flagship devices is one of the most iterative, particularly when it comes to the non-Pro iPhones, and it left a lot of folks kind of underwhelmed. But the reason why I classify the iPhone 14 Plus as the newest iPhone is because since Apple went with their most recent design overhaul with this flat industrial look, the only way to get the larger variant iPhone was going with the Pro Max version that was available. And during that time, Apple flipped the switch by offering a mini iPhone next to the regular standard version, which saw limited success, to put it nicely. So in what's likely an effort to win back consumers looking for a larger iPhone that isn't going to completely break the bank, we now have the iPhone 14 Plus. Well, I've had this one for about 24 hours, so let's talk about it. So by far the biggest and bit of a spoiler alert, the only real major change that comes with the iPhone 14 Plus is gonna be its size and its form factor. And even saying that is kind of a half truth because if you've ever had the iPhone 12 or 13 Pro Max, it's gonna look and feel quite familiar. But of course, the main thing to take notice of here is the massive size the 14 Plus wields. You can see how it looks compared to the normal iPhone 14, and the size difference is significant, no doubt. It has the same extra large 6.7-inch display that the latest Pro Max variants have, and I have it here next to my 13 Pro Max and it's virtually identical. But with the 14 Plus being a non-Pro iPhone, you get the larger size, but the frame here is aluminum, not stainless steel, and the glass in the back has a glossy finish as opposed to a frosted one. It's not as heavy in the hand as the Pro Max versions, and I actually think it's easier to grip with this glossy finish, but it is way more prone to fingerprints and smudges. Now, I went with the new blue color, which I think does look nice. It kind of resembles the blue that the 13 Pros debuted, but I do wish it was a bit more saturated. The colors on the non-Pro iPhone 14s is kind of meh overall in my opinion, but it still looks good. And Apple's high standard of quality no doubt is represented here, as the iPhone 14 Plus not only looks really nice, it feels superb in the hand as well. I know it's only been 24 hours, but I could already tell that people will probably really like this larger size just because that's the trend right now, but compared to the regular 14, I'm just gonna come on and say that the Plus is not as comfortable. The phone is so wide in the hand, you have to grip it harder to ensure that you don't drop it, and because the frame is completely flat, it digs into your palm, which is not a big deal if you're doing it for a short period of time, but you start to feel the fatigue if you're holding the phone for an extended session. Luckily, it's not as heavy as the Pro Max version as I mentioned earlier, so it's not as uncomfortable, but it's something to keep in mind if you're trying to decide on which size is best for you. Now that said, the benefit of having a larger screen is nice, especially if you game a lot or watch a lot of videos, and the display on the 14 Plus is pretty fantastic. It's a Super Retina XDR OLED panel that comes in at a resolution of 2778 by 1284, and it performs really well. Content comes off sharp, you get beautiful colors with the wide P3 color gamut, the contrast is superb with those true blacks, and HDR content looks outstanding on this phone. It does, however, have its limits, mainly around its refresh rate, as it maxes out at 60Hz, which is almost a rare thing these days. Now, I will say that Apple's 60Hz doesn't feel as antiquated due to the best-in-class optimization of Apple's software, so it's not something that I would consider a deal breaker in this case. Now, following the same blueprint that Apple has used for a long time, the iPhone 14 Plus will have the larger size, but when it comes to internals, it's basically going to be identical with the regular iPhone 14. And that's kind of a bummer because the big issue with the non-Pro iPhone 14 is that it's jarringly similar to last year's iPhone 13, even by Apple standards. And the biggest change is that both of these phones are equipped with last year's processor, the A15 Bionic, which is a noticeable break with precedent, as Apple has always installed their newest chips to all of their flagship iPhones up until this point. Now, to be fair, it's not exactly the same as last year's A15 Bionic. It does have an additional GPU core, which technically does make it slightly better, but it's a pretty minuscule update to say the least. Now, it doesn't mean that the iPhone 14 Plus or the regular 14 perform poorly. It's still an ultra zippy and fast phone, and it'll stay that way for a while. This is really just a strategy shift, in my opinion, to better differentiate the Pro model iPhones, and this being the bubble year, it's going to be the most painful to accept mentally, but it really shouldn't impact most people's user experiences. And it's not a complete wash when it comes to performance, as the iPhone 14 Plus has a pretty significant ace up its sleeve, and that's its battery life. During the keynote, Apple straight up claimed that the iPhone 14 Plus is the best iPhone ever when it comes to battery life, and considering just how much we're using our phones these days, this is something that could be a game changer. Now, I've only had the phone for a short amount of time, so I can't say anything definitive, but so far it's definitely mirroring the all-star battery performance of my 13 Pro Max. And this makes a ton of sense, as the 14 Plus has a physically larger battery, but not as power hungry as the Pro models. You don't have a high refresh rate display, no dynamic island, and no always on display, so it's not surprising that this phone should do the best when it comes to battery life. It is kind of sad that it's like likely able to have this badge due to not having features that people likely want, but I'm gonna put the battery life to the test to see if Apple claims are legit, so keep an eye out for the more comprehensive review that's coming really soon. Now, the last thing about the iPhone 14 Plus that I want to talk about are its cameras, and I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but this is all familiar stuff. You get a dual camera system on the back, which consists of a 12 megapixel primary wide angle camera and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and you also get the true depth selfie camera on the front, which also comes in at 12 megapixels. And the first thing that I want to make clear is that these cameras perform great, truly some of the best images coming out of any phone right now, which is impressive. The stills are sharp, accurate when it comes to colors, phenomenal dynamic range, and very good performance in low light conditions. 4K video on the 14 Plus continues to blow the competition out of the water as the footage comes out beautiful and still offers the most frame rates on any mobile device period, and overall the camera suite on this phone is top of the line in every possible way. Now, I'm sounding relatively unenthusiastic about all this, not because what I'm saying isn't true, but because again, it's very similar to last year's performance. And look, I get that you're not going to be able to have groundbreaking changes every year, especially when it comes to camera performance, as even big ones will come off incremental to most users. That's just how cameras are. But continuing on with the real lack of differentiation between the iPhone 13, adding this to the list only exacerbates that mental letdown. Now, it's not a complete rinse and repeat, as the iPhone 14 Plus does have access to the new photonic engine for improved image processing and new features for video like the action stabilization and 4K cinematic mode, which I will be putting to the test. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on those results in the upcoming comprehensive review. So 24 hours later, I have mixed feelings about the iPhone 14 Plus. I think it's a way more compelling device than the regular iPhone 14, which, if you follow this channel, I basically said was likely going to go down as one of the worst new iPhones of all time. And this is mainly because it does offer the ability to get a bigger screen and way better battery life, which are two major things that people look for when getting a phone that wasn't exactly available last year at this price point. Now, off the rip, I do think that paying an additional $100 and going with the iPhone 14 Pro is the way better buy though. That little bit of cash will get you a far more premium phone when it comes to build, the newest and fastest Apple Silicon, a super nice 120Hz ProMotion display, a way more robust camera system, and all the new features like Dynamic Island and the always-on display. That's quite a plethora of really impressive features that I think is fair to say is a bargain for an additional $100. And that's what ultimately puts a lot of question marks in my head around whether or not the iPhone 14 Plus is going to be sought after or not. It's an interesting phone that I think people will enjoy. It's just really awkwardly positioned within the lineup. But hey, it's only been 24 hours and I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think about the iPhone 14 Plus? Do you think it's going to be a hit? Or do you think it's going to fall short, much like its non-Plus counterpart? Curious to get your thoughts. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments down below. Okay, that's about it for this review. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up if you guys found it useful. Again, I'd really appreciate it. Check out these other reviews if you're looking for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.